Hello, everyone. This is Mohammed Akif with Akif CPA, and today we'll be discussing one of our client stories. So, technically, what we do is we go through our leads. We pick one of the best ones, which has the most description. See, let you guys know what is going on, what kind of leads do we get, what kind of problems are we dealing with, and then the solution to those problems, right? So, today we'll be discussing a lot of the basic stuff. I'll go through one of the leads. You'll see what this particular client was going through, what were their issues, and then how we were able to help them. So majority of our leads we are able to convert them, help them out, and then see what solutions we are able to provide. And this could be in multiple areas, right? So just not one type of lead. So we might be discussing accounting, we might be discussing tax, bookkeeping, you name it. So without any ado, let's get started. So let me share my screen with you guys. All right, so here we go. Perfect. All right, so let me just get my pen so we can see the red color. All right, let me get the red one. And then let me do the, not that screen, let me do the pen. Perfect. So this lead is about a small business, right? So this is a small business lead. So hello, Keith. I found your video on YouTube regarding tax deductions for content creator. All right. So they were watching some video that we have regarding content creators. I was wondering, you mentioned that the registration as a sole proprietorship is not good because you end up paying high tax percentage possible. However, I found that single member LLCs end up in the same scenario due to pass-through taxation, where the business itself is not responsible for the taxes, but the owner is. Okay. What do you recommend for one person, small business aimed at becoming a media organization, multiple forms of media from cinematography, photography, and merchandise? Perfect. All right. So what we have right now is so what we have is, first, this person is a sole proprietorship. All right. Okay. And then so the other issue is, of course, the taxation, right, that comes with being a sole proprietorship. So the issue over here is that this person is a sole proprietorship, wants to run multiple businesses, as you can see, and they're trying to figure it out. Does S corp make sense for them, or is it the right structure for them? And then they're thinking maybe the taxation is the same thing, because of course sole proprietorship and S corp are pass-through entities. So if you are a LLC, single member LLC, 100%, by default, the IRS is going to classify you as a disregarded entity. And what do I mean by disregarded entity? What it means is that for legal purposes, you are separate, but for tax purposes, the LLC income and expenses are filed within your 1040. That means a separate tax return is not required. You can file the LLC income and expenses with your 1040 and pay tax on it. So that's what disregarded entity means. Of course, legally separate, but for tax purposes is one. And then so what happens when you are a disregarded entity, right? And then how the taxes play out, because legally you are separate. So the way it works with a sole proprietorship is that once you have income, I'm not talking about expenses, of course, losses. This is when you have net profits. You do end up paying self-employment tax in addition to the federal tax, and plus the state taxes if you're in a state which has state taxes. So federal tax, state tax, and then the third part is the self-employment tax. The self-employment tax is 15.3% on top of your federal and state taxes. So in combination, somebody could be in a 30% bracket just because if they add up 15%, 15.3 plus other 15%, which includes the state taxes. I'm giving an example here. So they might have, they might end up being in a 30% bracket. How is it different from a S corp? How is the sole proprietorship as a disregarded entity separate? How is it different from the S corp? So the way the S corp works is, of course, it's again a pass-through entity. That means the corporation or the S corp does not pay any taxes. The LLC does not pay any taxes. And then so the owner pays taxes. But how the taxes work differently. In S corp, what happens is that if you have a net profit, LLC disregarded net profit versus S corp net profit, the S corp net profit is only subjected to federal and state taxes if you're living in a state with state taxes. There is no self-employment tax on the net profits from the S corp, and which means that 15.3% on that net profit is not applicable. That's one of the biggest difference between a disregarded entity versus a S corp. Of course, S corp has its own rules. You cannot take everything in profits. If you're a more than 2% shareholder, must do salary, a reasonable compensation salary. So not everything can go into profit. But the biggest difference is net profit from a disregarded entity, sole proprietorship, subject to self-employment taxes, and then net profit from a S corp not subject to self-employment taxes. So the solution over here, for this individual client, one is to, of course, to see how much income. That's number one, right? We got to make sure, because the taxes only come in if you have income. How much income is the LLC earning? And then I don't mean by revenue. What I mean is net profits. What is the net profit of the LLC? Right? Doesn't matter if they're S corp or disregarded. What is the net profit? That's number one that I'm looking at, right? So income, which is net profit, that I am looking at. And then, of course, number two is that what other sources of income, other sources, this individual has, because that matters too. If you only have LLC income, that's one thing. But if you have a side job or a main job, and this is your side job or side income, then things do make a difference. We have to see what bracket you're in, right? So it's not only the LLC income, what other sources of income that you have, and if they're significant or not, right? That's number two. And number three, of course, this person talking about multiple lines, which can be resolved through getting multiple LLCs, which can be owned by this LLC. That's number one. Number two could be, doing business as a DBA and assume name from the county. That's number two. I wouldn't recommend starting brand new, a separate S corp or a partnership, because you're starting out. So initially, I the best option is to have either a DBA or a separate LLC. So when one LLC is owned by another LLC, there's only one filing, one tax filing. The main LLC that owns the LLC will combine all the information and report one tax return. So you're not filing separate tax returns for each LLC. That's a great thing about the LLCs. When they're disregarded, 100% owned by a person or an entity, it's only one tax return filed. And then it's also great for liability purposes too. So either you can do a DBA or you can have a separate LLC. The tax filing won't change. Of course, you will have to maintain the separate books. You must maintain separate books even if you have a DBA. That's very important. And then so these are the solutions that I would be looking at if I'm a small business owner who is in this scenario, especially for content creators, right? Because they have multiple streams of revenue. Of course, in some cases, they're using different platforms. They're not only providing services, they're also selling, merchandise, right? Merch. And then they're selling on multiple platforms. So it's not one source of revenue. They have multiple sources of revenue, multiple types of revenue. And then so in some cases, it's depending upon how big the business is or what size of the business is, we either go with the DBA or we either go with the LLC. Again, it really depends upon your case. This is not one size fit all scenario. Everybody's different. So when we are looking at what makes sense, staying sole proprietorship or S corp, we must look at the income. We must look at your other sources, your net profit of the LLC, and of course we've got to decide how things have been, what are the projections, and then if this makes sense, meaning that if the S corp election makes sense. All right. So anything else, shoot us an email, info@akifcpa.com. Again, this is one of the client stories that we had, one of the emails that we received, and then we're providing solutions. So if you have any specific issue, email us at info@akifcpa.com, and we'll be gladly help you. Thank you.